Part 1, the fall his name was Victor, and before everything fell apart, he had what most people would call a good life. He ran a small logistics company with his brother, employed a dozen workers, and provided comfortably for his wife and 2 children. He wasn't wealthy, but he was stable, and stability had always felt like enough. Then, within the span of 18 months, everything collapsed. A major client defaulted on a contract worth nearly half of the company's annual revenue. Around the same time, his brother, struggling with personal debts Victor didn't know about, quietly drained funds from the business account before disappearing entirely, leaving Victor to face creditors alone. The business folded within months. The house went next, sold to cover debts that were never really his to pay. His wife, unable to handle the stress and the shame that came with losing everything, took their children and moved in with her parents in another state, telling Victor she needed time. Though both of them understood what that really meant. Within a year, Victor had lost his business, his home, and his family. All that remained was an old sedan with over 200,000 miles on it, and a bank account with less than $300. Part 2, the car. Victor didn't plan to sleep in his car. He told himself it was temporary, just until he sorted things out, just until the next paycheck came in from whatever odd jobs he could find. But temporary situations have a way of becoming permanent when there's no safety net left to catch you. He found a quiet parking lot on the outskirts of the city, behind a small strip mall that didn't enforce overnight parking restrictions too strictly. He would fold down the back seat, lay out a thin blanket, and try to sleep despite the cramped space and the constant fear of being noticed by police or security. He showered at a nearby gym, using a membership he barely afforded. He kept a small bag of clothes in the trunk, rotating through the same few outfits, trying to stay presentable enough to walk into job interviews without anyone suspecting he had nowhere else to go. The hardest part wasn't the physical discomfort, though that was brutal in its own right, the summer heat trapping inside the car like an oven. The winter cold seeping through every cracked window sill. The hardest part was the shame. Victor avoided old friends, he avoided family gatherings. He created excuses to explain why he couldn't visit, why he couldn't answer certain questions, why his phone number had changed. He wasn't ready to let anyone see how far he had fallen. Part 3, the hotel. Every night, Victor parked his car in a spot that gave him a clear view of a large hotel across the street. It was an elegant building, not the largest in the city, but well-maintained, with warm lights glowing from its windows late into the evening, guests coming and going through polished glass doors. At first, the hotel was simply a landmark, something to orient himself by in the dark, but over time it became something more. Victor found himself staring at it most nights before falling asleep, watching bellhops carry luggage, watching families laugh as they walked through the lobby, watching the warm glow of a life that felt impossibly distant from the one he was currently living inside a cramped car seat. One night, almost as a joke to himself, bitter and exhausted, Victor whispered into the darkness of his car, "One day I'm going to own that place." He didn't believe it, not really. It was the kind of thing people say to comfort themselves during their lowest moments, a small flicker of defiance against overwhelming despair. But somewhere in the repetition of that sentence, night after night, something inside Victor started to shift. Part 4, building from nothing. Victor found work as a delivery driver, one of the few jobs that didn't require a permanent address or a polished resume. It was exhausting labor, long hours behind the wheel delivering packages across the city, but it provided just enough income to survive. He started saving every dollar he could, sometimes as little as $5 or $10 a week. He ate the cheapest food available, avoided any unnecessary expense, and slowly, painfully, began rebuilding a financial foundation from absolute zero. During his breaks, Victor started reading. He borrowed books from the public library about business, sales, and real estate, subjects he had never studied formally but had always been curious about. He would sit in his car during lunch breaks, reading by the dim overhead light, absorbing every piece of information he could about how hotels operated, how businesses recovered from bankruptcy, how ordinary people had rebuilt fortunes from nothing. He learned about revenue management. He learned about occupancy rates and guest satisfaction scores. He learned about how struggling hotels could be acquired at a fraction of their value if you knew where to look and how to negotiate. None of this knowledge came easily. Victor was exhausted every single day, running on minimal sleep and constant financial stress, but he refused to let that exhaustion stop him from learning. Part 5, The Small Beginning. After 8 months of delivery driving and disciplined saving, Victor had accumulated just enough money to make a small investment. He didn't buy a hotel. He bought a rundown vending machine route from a man retiring in his neighborhood, 3 old machines placed in local laundromats and auto shops. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even particularly profitable at first. But it was a business Victor could control entirely on his own, without needing a partner who might disappear with the funds, without needing a landlord who might raise the rent beyond what he could afford. Victor treated those 3 vending machines with the same seriousness most people reserve for major corporations. He restocked them meticulously. He tracked which products sold best in each location. He reinvested every single dollar of profit back into expanding the route instead of spending it on himself. Slowly, the 3 machines became 5. 5 became 12. Within 2 years, Victor owned a small but genuinely profitable vending machine business, spread across dozens of locations throughout the city. He was still sleeping in his car during much of this time, unwilling to spend money on rent that could instead be reinvested into growing the business. Friends who eventually learned about his situation couldn't understand why a man running a growing business would choose to sleep in a vehicle instead of finding an apartment. Victor's answer was always the same. I didn't come this far to get comfortable too early. Comfort is what kills momentum. Part 6, The Real Estate Leap. By the 3rd year of sleeping in his car, Victor had saved enough money to make his first real estate investment. He didn't buy a home for himself. He bought a small, distressed duplex in a struggling part of the city, renovated it using skills he had taught himself through online videos and second-hand tools, and rented out both units within months. The rental income from that first property allowed him to purchase a second property within a year, then a third. Victor had discovered something about himself during those difficult years of sacrifice. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building, methodically and relentlessly, towards something much bigger than himself. During this period, Victor finally left his car for good, moving into a small, modest apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but after 3 years of cramped nights behind a steering wheel, it felt like a palace. But Victor never forgot the hotel across from where he used to park. He drove past it regularly, watching it, studying it, learning everything he could about its ownership and its financial struggles, which had only worsened during the years he had spent building his own foundation from nothing. Part 7, The Opportunity. 5 years after his business collapsed, Victor learned through a local business contact that the hotel he used to stare at every night was in serious financial trouble. Poor management, outdated facilities, and a series of bad investments had pushed the property to the edge of foreclosure. Victor didn't hesitate. He had spent years preparing exactly for a moment like this, studying the hospitality industry, building capital through his vending machines and rental properties, learning how to negotiate distressed asset purchases from every book and mentor he had absorbed knowledge from during those long nights in his car. He approached the bank managing the property's debt with a carefully structured offer, using a combination of his own savings, a business loan built on years of proven financial discipline, and a small group of investors he had built relationships with throughout his rental property ventures. It took nearly a year of negotiations, inspections, and financial restructuring. But eventually, Victor signed the papers that made him the new owner of the hotel he used to watch from the front seat of his old sedan. Part 8, Standing in the lobby. The day Victor officially took ownership, he walked into the lobby of that hotel for the first time not as a homeless man staring from across the street, but as its new owner. He stood in the same lobby he had once watched through his car window, the same warm lighting, the same polished floors, except now it belonged to him. He remembers standing there for nearly 10 minutes, unable to move, overwhelmed by a flood of memories from those 3 brutal years. The cramped nights, the gym showers, the shame of avoiding old friends, the whispered promise he had made to himself in the darkness of his car not really believing it would ever come true. He walked over to the exact parking spot across the street where he used to sleep, now visible from the hotel's front entrance, and stood there for a long time in silence. Part 9, rebuilding the hotel, and himself, Victor, didn't stop at ownership. He completely renovated the property over the following 2 years, applying every lesson he had learned about hospitality, guest experience, and operational efficiency during his years of self-education. He personally trained his staff to treat every single guest with the same dignity and respect he had craved during his lowest moments. Understanding better than most hotel owners what it truly felt like to have nowhere to go. The hotel's reputation transformed, reviews improved, occupancy rates climbed steadily. Within 3 years, Victor's hotel had become one of the most highly rated properties in the entire city. During this period, Victor also reconnected with his estranged family. His children, now teenagers, visited him at the hotel, staying in one of the very rooms he had once watched glowing from across a dark, lonely parking lot. His relationship with his ex-wife healed slowly, built on a foundation of respect rather than the resentment that had once driven them apart. Part 10, the lesson. Victor often tells his story to young entrepreneurs and struggling business owners who reach out to him, hoping to understand how a man who slept in his car for 3 years managed to build the life he now lives. His answer is always rooted in the same principle. Rock bottom isn't the end of your story, it's simply the foundation you didn't know you were standing on. Everything I built afterward was built on the discipline I learned during the years I had absolutely nothing left to lose. He talks about the importance of patience, of resisting the temptation to seek comfort too early, of treating every